2024 was an amazing year for pro Valorant. We saw Sentinels return to the top after 3 long years, APAC win their very first international title, and EDG defy all expectations and lift the VCT Champions Trophy. There's only one question left on everyone's minds. Who was the best Valorant player in the world this year? To answer that question, we're going to dive deep into the data from VCT 2024. We'll be carefully selecting statistics which tell us much more about a player's impact and value than KD ratio ever could, and ultimately we'll be able to assess each player's complete contributions down to the roles and even the agents that they play. On top of that, we'll spend some time looking at the intangible value that support players bring to the table, so we can truly understand which players are essential to their team's success, even if they aren't the ones getting kills.
What a stun. Oh my god.
Finally, I'll also be introducing a new way to identify exactly which players are the deadliest in the server, or in other words, which players you do not want to peek. Stay tuned, because by the end of this video, we'll be able to crown the best Valorant players of 2024, but also have a pretty good idea of who to watch out for next season. There's always been a long-winded debate on who the best players are. Being good at Valorant doesn't just mean you're getting a lot of kills, you also need good game knowledge, smart utility usage, and strong team fundamentals, and this is even more apparent at the pro level. There are so many different things to compare, but as much as I hate talking about kills, they are ultimately important in a game like Valorant. If we're gonna have to look at kills, we should be looking at the true impact of each kill and the situations that they lead to. When I evaluated kill impact last year, players like Demon1 and Aspas were some of the players with the highest kill impact, but we were also able to identify Kong Kong as one of the most impactful players from 2023. Well, we all know he ended up winning champs this year, so this stat is important for not only understanding which players were the best, but which players have potential to win championships in the future. To calculate true kill impact, we need to understand the theory behind it. Every kill in a game has vastly different implications on each round's outcomes. If you're just on cleanup duty for the last couple kills after your team has already won the round, those kills are going to be much less impactful than winning a big clutch, for example. This is why we have to start by understanding what the chances are to win every type of game state. By looking at every round from VCT 2024, I determined the probability of winning a round in every game state. For example, the chance to win a 4v5 this year was about 29.1%, but the chance to win a 3v4 decreases to about 25.3%. It's interesting to see that even though you're one player down in each of these situations from 4v5 to 1v2, your chances to win decreases considerably each time, so having more teammates alive and working together with them will always give you better chances at overturning man disadvantages. Throughout all of VCT 2024, there were 5 times that players actually won 1v5s, which brings the chance to win a 1v5 to 0.2%. In some of these situations, time was already low on the spike, like this clip from Ban against Team Secret. This clip was still impressive and very important, but it wasn't necessarily a raw 1v5. However, I was surprised to see that a lot of these 1v5s were actually raw 1v5s. It takes a different level of player to be able to win these straight up, and Trex, Narrate, and Forsaken were able to pull them off on some of the biggest stages this year. Now that we have data on the probability to win each type of game state, we can use this to understand the true impact of each kill throughout a round. For example, if you bring your team from a 5v2 to a 5v1, you're only improving your team's chances of winning by 2.5%. On the other hand, if you bring your team from a 2v2 to a 2v1, you've increased your team's chances of winning the round by 33.6%, which is a high impact kill. Now we're going to look at all the kills that occurred in high pressure tier 1 matches, which I'm defining as either a regional playoff match or a match at an international event. For every one of these kills, we can calculate the exact impact it had on the round based on the win probabilities of each game state, and finally, I'm dividing the total impact of each player by the number of rounds they played, because obviously if you're playing more rounds, you have more chances to earn impact. Starting from the bottom, the top 10 most impactful players this year were Artis, Shy, Xiao, Safe, Kong Kong, Texture, Cryo, Aspas, and in number 2 was Zekin. I wonder if you can guess who the most impactful player of 2024 was. For comparison, this is where 2022 Ye would have been on this list. The most impactful player in the world this year was Primi. Now, I knew Primi was a mechanical god, but I personally doubted his actual game-to-game impact, but it's clearly very impressive. An easier way to understand this number is to think that Primi's kill contributions increase his team's chances to win any given round by 17.64%, which is insane for one person alone. One big thing to keep in mind here is that Primi entered Tier 1 VCT late into the season, so compared to others, he simply has a smaller sample size. But if he's able to keep this up next year, Primi is definitely somebody we need to watch out for. On the other end of the spectrum, here were the bottom 10 players in terms of kill impact from 2024. I think it's unsurprising to see some of these names on this list because they are known as Valorant's low fragging IGLs and are generally players that focus on playing supportive roles. Even though we're properly evaluating the impact of each kill, this statistic is still going to favor certain roles over others because some roles have more opportunities to get impactful kills, which is why most of the top 10 are still duelists and most of the bottom 10 are IGLs or heavy support players. A slightly different way we could look at this impact rating is by role or even more specifically by agent. Starting with Duelist, we'll look at each player's kill impact on the most popular agents from that role to determine who the most impactful players were on each agent. I made sure that each player appearing on these lists played an agent at least 100 rounds, so Primi is not going to show up on this list because he did not have enough playoff or international rounds played. Cryo clearly had an insane season on Jett, but what's also funny is to see Meteor actually have a higher impact rating than Texture on Jett, as he played it in a couple matches where Genji ran double duelist comps. We can see that Zekin is the best duelist on dive agents like Neon and Raze, but is not one of the better Jett players in the world, which we all know requires slightly different strengths. On the other hand, Aspas is still a master of the traditional duelists of Jett and Raze, but he was much farther down the list for Neon this year. Next, we'll look at the most impactful Sentinel players. It's not a surprise to see Alpha as the best Killjoy player in the world, but Shy surprised me with the highest impact on Cypher. For Initiators, I'm roughly splitting this into Scan Initiators and everything else. It's crazy to see that Leo didn't play the entire season, but still had the highest impact on Sova. EMEA seemed to have the best Sova players in the world, with the top 3 players having a large gap over the 4th best Sova, which was Sasi. Cruz Heat had absolutely insane kill impact on Fade compared to everyone else who played her this year. Here are the top Flash Initiators, and it's funny to see both Rienz and Woot from Heretics as the most impactful Gecko players. And finally, here are the most impactful controller players of the year. Bang put up very impressive numbers on both Omen and Viper, so clearly a strong pickup for Sentinels. I want to point out a super interesting fact about controller impact. By far, the best individual impact on any agent was on Clove, but there was only one player that played it more than 100 rounds, and that was the 2024 VCT champion Smoggy. Clove was an amazing fit for Smoggy's playstyle and role on EDG, and it enabled him to become the single most impactful player on any agent this year. Smoggy's Clove was a huge X factor in EDG's championship run. Understanding the true impact of kills has helped us a lot in understanding which players are the ones getting impact frags and which ones aren't, and this becomes a very good measure of which players are the best players in the world. But in the end, this metric still values kills over all other aspects of the game. There is a lot of intangible value that support players bring in Valorant, and a lot that isn't captured through kills. We still need some way to assess team fundamentals of each player, and how players contribute to winning aside from kills. A simple way to start assessing this is assist percentage. Here were the top 10 players with the highest assist percentage from 2024, which means the percentage of kills that they helped their team get. Lev was seriously an assist machine because Mazino, King, and Calm were all in the top 10 for this metric. This stat isn't bad for understanding which players are good support players, but I want to dig deeper and look at team contributions as a whole. Ideally, we want to understand all the team fundamentals and bring to light the value that support players really contribute. I created my own rating, which counts every assist earned, but also things like tradability, which means their teammates were actually able to trade their deaths, and if a player was good at getting trades. I also included whether or not players were good in the clutch, and weighed the difficulty of each clutch as well. I counted all these team contributions up and divided them by the rounds played. And here are the top 10 team contributors from 2024. Lenny was an incredible support player for Talon, and he averaged 1.68 team contributions per round, while Simon was clearly a massive supportive part of EDG winning champs.
Instead, walking over, Kang's at an off angle. All he needs is the one kill, but running way ahead of it.
Good stun. Oh my god, the guy stunned him too.
Envy, Tens, Munchkin, and Kix all had some of the highest assist percentages for their teams, but also had high combined team contribution ratings, which indicates that they provided a lot of intangible value for their teams aside from getting kills themselves. Up until this point, we've talked a lot about kill impact and team contributions, which all help us determine how valuable a player really is. But this video is ultimately about who the best player is. We all want to know exactly which players are the deadliest in the server, regardless of if their team wins games or not. This final statistic will tell us which players absolutely dominate everyone else as the most elite shooters in the game. To assess this fairly, we're only going to look at isolated fights, which means I'm only looking at kills which were not the result of a trade, nor did they lead to a trade. First, we need to understand the expected outcome of a fight, because an op winning a fight against a classic is not really fair. For each gun in the game, I'm going to calculate the probability of that gun winning against every other gun. This is an example of the phantom win rate against every gun for untraded fights only. Now I'm going to use these values to factor into each duel taken. If a player won a fight that they weren't supposed to, they'll be credited proportionally. On the other hand, if a rifle kills a player with a sheriff, they'll earn less credit for winning that fight. I can calculate this for every player in 2024 so we can know exactly which players are the best at winning isolated duels. Without further ado, here are the top 30 deadliest players of 2024. These are the players that you do not want to peak alone. They're the ones that can win fights off their raw mechanics even when they should not be winning them. I think there are very few surprises on this list so far. Most of these players already have big reputations in the pro scene, but I wonder if you can actually guess the #1 most dominant player in the world. What this rating truly means is that the deadliest player in the world has a 9.5% higher chance of winning any given duel than the average player. That's insane to think about, because if we look back at the phantom win rate graph, that's similar to the advantage that you get for buying an op over a rifle. Think about that. That means if you were a pro in 2024 fighting against this player, it felt as if you're dueling an op. The most dominant player in the world this year was Fnatic's Leo. Even though he wasn't able to play out the whole season, he won an incredible number of isolated fights and many at a gun disadvantage. It should make much more sense why players thought Leo was one of the best players in the world last year. He doesn't have as much kill impact as other players on Fnatic, but if you're a player in the server, you probably feel that peaking Leo is a huge mistake. Obviously, Leo and many other players on this list didn't have as many chances to play against the top competition in the world, so it's important to mention the individuals that made deep tournament runs this year, like Meteor, John QT, and Chichu, who all won a different major championship. It's crazy how so many Fnatic members are high in this metric, showing the mechanical strength of their team. But it's also reassuring for Sen fans to see that both of their new players were some of the scariest players in the server to fight against. Now, having gone over all these stats, I want to leave off on this one final thought. There's still no way to denote a single best player, because there are just so many aspects of Valorant, and the most important thing in order to win is to do your job well. If we look back at EDG, who won champs this year, each one of their players appeared near the top for a completely different statistic. Kong did his job delivering high kill impact every single game, while Smoggy had his moments on certain agents like Clove to completely take over when needed. Simon was one of the best supportive players with one of the highest team contribution scores. He won extremely important clutches, assisted his team through great utility usage, and provided the trades when needed. Chichu was EDG's shooter, who won those fights that shouldn't be won and forced their opponents to use utility instead of dry peeking, even if he was all alone. EDG's IGL Nobody was the only one not on the top of any lists, but if I were able to quantify his ability as an IGL, I'm sure it would be up there as well. You need a perfect balance of strengths for a team to be successful, so we should all strive towards being better at our roles and being better teammates, rather than simply trying to get kills all the time. And maybe your team will be the ones to win champs someday. That's it for this video. Please subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.